Okay, Luke. So we mentioned, I think it was last week, that at some point we were going to be ready to have the discussion about the veterans on this team. So when we're talking about the veterans on this team, really the guys that we're talking about Gary Harris, we're talking about Terrence Ross. I'm more so speaking in a general sense right now. Michael Carter-Williams, Robin Lopez, to a certain extent, E'Twaun Moore, Jonathan Isaac, Markelle Fultz, right? Out of that group, the only two guys that are really getting minutes on a nightly basis are Gary Harris and Terrence Ross. Now, Gary Harris missed, a few games at the start of the season, but for the last, 2 weeks or so, he's been getting a lot of minutes in the rotation. He's been a big part of that second unit. And obviously, coming into this week, the Magic had one of the best starting lineups in the NBA in terms of their net rating. I haven't looked at it tonight, but I'm sure the last couple of games has probably come down a little bit if I had to guess. So one thing that people are pointing at is just the performance of Terrence Ross and Gary Harris, right? Say what you want about, Terrence Ross. He's been a fan favorite over the years, has really always been a catalyst off the bench offensively. You bring him into the game, he's got the ultimate green light. You count on him for instant offense. I don't know that you're necessarily looking at Terrence to be like this calming presence on the floor for the young guys. I know he's a good veteran, in his own right, talking to guys, during practice and in the locker room, but specifically throughout the course of a game, he's not a guy that you're counting on to like organize the offense and really calm everybody down. Heading into this season, Luke, I don't think many people thought that Terrence had a chance to be in that starting lineup. Gary Harris is a guy that we all thought had a real potential to start. Guy's making $21 million this year. A guard. We didn't know, was Cole going to start? Was Jalen going to start? What was going to happen at the point guard spot? But we thought Gary Harris has a good chance to start either at the 2 or the 3. Gary, with his experience in Denver, the team success that they've had, the playoff moments that he's been in, he's the guy that I thought was going to be able to come in at any given time, organize things a little bit to a certain extent, make sure guys know where they're supposed to be, and really just be able to calm everybody down. And we'll get more into kind of like their raw numbers and how they're kind of underperforming that way. But just in terms of like the intangibles that veterans bring, we're not seeing that right now in the flow of the game. I do believe that those guys are valuable to have at practice and in the locker room and, on the bus and, the team playing and talking to guys. But just in terms of being like the steadying force on the floor, we have not seen that out of either Terrence Ross or Gary Harris so far to start the season.
Yeah. Like you said, a lot of us thought that Gary Harris would be a guy that could step into the starting lineup, be a veteran presence that the team needs. And unfortunately, Jonathan, I think we've seen so far this season why he's not in the starting lineup. You've got your other vet, T. Ross, that'd be coming off the bench. If Gary Harris was good enough, if Mose thought he was good enough in terms of his shooting, and if he wasn't off and everything and checked all the boxes, no reason. I don't think this is a strategy play as to why Gary Harris isn't starting, right? He's also just probably not in the plans of the team for the future. That he knows that. The front office might have told Mosley that, and they said, work on it to throw your young guys in there at the starting lineup and just kind of see what we have and let them grow, because Harris isn't going to be in our plans at the end of the season. Jonathan, you can look at the numbers and all you want, right? I mean, they're not good. But if you look at the per 36, it's worse. Gary Harris for per 36, Jonathan, 8.5 points a game. That should tell you enough of what it is and like what he's been able to contribute so far. I think he's playing 20 minutes a game and averaging 5. So Gary Harris is just not the Gary Harris that we knew. He's not the Gary Harris that I was excited about when the Magic got him. Everyone obviously, would eventually would start to talk about, RJ and RJ Hampton and everything. But I mean, I talked about it with you on and off air. I think Gary Harris can be a really key part of this team. I'm excited about Gary Harris. And unfortunately, he's just not He's not who we thought that he was or is. So we're getting the battered, maybe mentally worn down. I don't know, because he is a decent shooter, right? Like, he is a good 3-point shooter. But right now we're just not seeing it. And I don't know if it's rubbing off on T. Ross. I have no idea. So I really don't know as far as these guys go, Jonathan, what can be said besides they're definitely not in the future plans because they're not producing like it, and I don't know if they're acting like it.
Well, so I think another criticism that we've seen is like that these guys are like checked out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that that's fair to say. I can tell you last night, like standing next to the tunnel watching those guys like walk in the locker room after the game, like Gary Harris like hit the door or something like that. Like he was obviously pissed off and frustrated at that loss. I believe it was after the Nets game the other night. Terrence led all scorers, 17 points, shot the ball pretty well. I believe he was asked after that game, just kind of what's going on with his offense so far to start the year. And he said, I'm still trying to figure out what my role is on this team, where my shots are going to come from in the offense. So obviously he's not exactly comfortable in his current role. Luke, you talked about the per 36 numbers. Like let's talk about Terrence just for a second. Last year averaged 15.6 points per game in 29 minutes. This year 26 minutes, 9.4 points per game. He shot 41% from the floor last year. He's only dropped down to 39% from the floor this year. Okay. 5 less attempts per game though. And the 3-point shooting is really where the numbers drop. 33% last year, which isn't great in terms of, Terrence's standards, but a lot of the year last year, he was like the main focus, for the defensive team in that second unit. 33% last year. He's shooting 26% so far. His usage rate is down. And it's not just that he's getting like, really difficult looks. Like even his catch and shoot numbers are also down from last year. Like just offensively across the board, Terrence Ross is not playing to the standard that we're accustomed to. And people, I guess it's a fair question to think. I don't know that I would vocalize it and kind of like put it out into the, the Twitterverse that I'm having these questions about, does he want to be here? Is it, his effort? There might be some of that. He might realize that this isn't where he wants to be right now, this stage in his career. He might want to play for a contender. But I do think there is some validity to the fact that he's still very much trying to figure out his role. And, the emphasis right now is on the young guys and, getting them minutes. And, again, his usage rate is down. So even when he's on the floor, he isn't as big of a part of of the offense.
Yeah, and I think, this is what I was going to say about T. Ross. I think a lot of it is coaching scheme. I think that, he was used to his role with the Magic the last few years. He knew his role, come off the bench, get hot, keep this team in games, elevate the bench unit. But you said something, I don't even think it was on air, a few weeks ago. You said something to the effect of like WCJ, where he sets his screens for T. Ross, it's below the 3-point line, whereas when guys like Khem Birch were setting screens in the bench unit for T. Ross, it was basically above the 3-point line, well above it, and Khem Birch also was setting just ridiculously hard screens, some would debate illegal, and allowing T. Ross to free up and shoot, and he'd curl off that screen and he'd be right there, right on the 3-point line. Now it seems like that's just different. The scheme is different. That's got to be a coaching thing. It's not like they don't do walkthroughs or they didn't do walkthroughs during camp or whatever it might have been. And Mosley told him like, T. Ross is a great shooter. Set these screens lower. Let him come off and shoot the mid range. I don't know what it is, but I will put some blame, I think, on the scheme. Like you said, his usage isn't as high. I just think he's not been able to get into a rhythm because he's trying to find his role because the scheme has been so different. And I think that is a huge thing. I think that like we can, dump on T. Ross all we want, but I do think it is philosophy as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, you don't want to make excuses for the head coach, but we have to be realistic with our expectations and what we're asking from a rookie, first-time head coach who doesn't have any experience really in making these types of adjustments. I think just in between, all the young guys trying to get them minutes, trying to fix things like the turnovers, getting it, kind of ingrained into their brains that even when you're not shooting the ball particularly well, that's even when you have to give more of an effort defensively. And, especially, in the Wizards game last night, we just didn't see that. So he's got a lot that he's trying to figure out right now. I think that just might be one thing that he's not really either concerned about or is able to get to yet. We all know that the second unit, look at the game that we won against the Knicks. That was Terrence Ross going crazy in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Obviously, the second unit and the team is going to be better as Terrence Ross is better. It's just kind of strange that, a couple of the staples of the Steve Clifford offense, like the pin downs for Terrence Ross, like the fake dribble handoff that Terrence Ross and Aaron Gordon would have kind of in the corner, and then Terrence would, backdoor cut and Aaron would hit him with the bounce pass.
Yeah.
We saw one instance of that in the first handful of games with Franz. We haven't gone back to it at all. If there's anyone on this roster that I think it would work with, I think it would be Franz. I think, obviously, different coaches, he wants to do things his own way. But if you're looking to get a guy like Terrence and kind of unlock him, Steve Clifford has done a better job of that than any coach that Terrence has had. So I don't think it would be, ill-advised for Mosley to go back and be like, all right, what was Terrence doing the last 3 years here that made him so successful? And then take a couple of those plays and implement that into the offense that you run, especially that backdoor. He's just had some crazy dunks off of that. Just get him some easy ones early in the game. Obviously, shooting is all about confidence. He doesn't seem very confident right now, even though he keeps pulling the trigger. But there's blame in multiple spots. I don't want to say it's all on Terrence or it's all on Mosley. Terrence needs to shoot the ball better. Again, I mentioned shooting, I believe, a career low in catch and shoot, if I'm not mistaken, but I know that it's down from last year. He's missing open shots as well. When he does get those opportunities, he needs to knock them down. So, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, with a shooter, especially Terrence Ross, who can get hot in a second, you need to treat them if you're the coach, you need to treat them like a quarterback who just came in the game, is replacing the star quarterback, comes in the game. What do? You run wheel routes, you get have them check down, screen passes, whatever you can to get them in rhythm is what you can do. And like you said, setting up T. Ross, the blueprint, and like you said, there to an extent you're able to defend Mosley because it's a different scenario. But what hasn't changed is that T. Ross should be the focal point of that second unit to me. I know that, Chuma is there and whatever, but T. Ross, I think right now offensively has the higher ceiling than a Chuma Okeke or a Gary Harris or whoever it is. I get you can try to give the benefit of the doubt to Mosley, but I can't. I really can't here because the blueprint is right in front of him.
Yeah.
You had the last 3-4 years of Terrence Ross game film that you can legitimately just see, okay, how does it, and maybe it just does, like I said, it all comes down to coaching philosophy. Who knows what the front office has been saying in his ear. I would also understand it more if the front, if he was playing way less minutes, right? He's not able to get in rhythm because of that. No, it's simply because he's not being used correctly. He's playing 3 minutes less a game. I really do think that this is something that falls on Mosley's shoulders in terms of that. And I think it's probably taken a mental toll on Terrence and his ability to shoot and his confidence. Terrence is a very confident player, but it's hard to do that when you completely, his role is completely different, it seems, and the way that they're using him. I don't know. It's almost like Mosley hasn't watched any film from previous years.
So, yeah, again, catch and shoot percentage, 27.8 on the year right now. That's a career low. Just for reference, last year it was 37.8. Back in 2018, 2019, when he was really shooting that thing, 42% catch and shoot opportunities. So he's missing open looks as well. So, I mean, I think what's so disappointing is we all knew that like a strong veteran leadership for this team was important. I feel like they do have that in the locker room, which is incredibly important, maybe even more important than it is on the floor. But we're not getting it on the floor. Like we signed Robin Lopez, we're like, oh, that'll be, like a good veteran. And the funniest thing at the time was like people were like, oh, he's going to come and be the backup center and Mo's going to be riding the bench. Like Robin Lopez is like a complete afterthought right now in terms of like the rotation. But it is really disappointing because we can't really count on anyone for that at this moment. I cannot believe I'm about to say this. Steve Clifford is listening right now somewhere laughing. I cannot wait for Michael Carter-Williams to come back. I really can't, because Michael Carter-Williams, whatever you want to say about him, he can at least come in and get the offense somewhat organized.
Yeah.
He's going to bring that edge defensively and competitively, but he's going to be able to help get the offense organized. Our biggest issue with Michael Carter-Williams was not, stop shooting threes. Like, that's just something that you should never do. But it was more so our frustration with Cliff, that Cliff was doing whatever he could to get Michael Carter-Williams on the floor to the detriment of a guy like Markelle Fultz. Like, relegating Markelle Fultz to, like, spot up corner threes at the end of the shot clock in an offense with Michael Carter-Williams, at that point you're playing, like, 4-on-5, 3-on-5. There's no point in having both of those guys out there together because neither of them can shoot. So that was always kind of the issue with Michael Carter-Williams. But right now, like, this team really could use Michael Carter-Williams, and it feels like until Markelle is going to come back, I think like Cole might be like the heart and soul of the team, like the vocal leader, but the guy that is really going to be able to lead from the floor is going to be Markelle Fultz, orchestrating the offense, getting everybody into the correct position. I still think he's the best passer, the best playmaker on this team. Him coming back into the fold is going to be really big. And then in terms of just like calming presences, it's going to be Markelle Fultz. It's going to be Jonathan Isaac. It's going to be MCW to a certain extent. Michael Carter-Williams should be back, I think, like relatively soon. Like if he's not back in like the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'm going to be like, okay, what's going on? Because training camp, it seemed like he wasn't that far off. Certainly ahead of Markelle and Jonathan Isaac. And that's a whole nother conversation that we can have about those guys. But we need those guys back, man.
My last question before we wrap up, obviously, Jonathan, we've been going on for about an hour here. MCW, when he comes back, does he take Gary Harris's minutes?
I think you could make the argument.
I think he should.
Well, this is the thing that I have with Gary Harris. At this point, you need to decide if you're still going to try to pursue a trade to get Gary Harris away.
You need something.
Or are you just going to buy him out? And the reason that you need to make that decision, because his value right now is at an all-time low. He's making $21 million. He's averaging 5 points a game. The last time that I checked was before the Nets game, so I don't know if this has changed at all. But in terms of an opponent's field goal percentage when you're the closest defender, he was one of the lowest on the team. So the eye test tells you that his defense has been fine. I would need to kind of look into some of the circumstances surrounding that, opponent field goal percentage, but he had one of the lowest on the team. So whatever it is, he's playing good defense. Guys are just knocking down shots over him regardless. So at least the eye test tells you that he's been fine defensively. I don't think he's amazing. I would still say Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs have been the best defenders on this team. And that stat actually tells you that. Opponent's field goal percentage when you're the closest defender, those guys are the two highest on the team.
Yeah.
Up there with Michael Mulder, who's played like 30 seconds. So I'm not going to, look too much into that. But, if you're not, you have to continue to play Gary Harris if you want to trade him. Nobody's going to trade anything worth of value for a guy making $22 million who, if you're looking to get something valuable, it's going to have to be collective assets. It's not just going to be one thing that you move, or you're just trading crappy guy for crappy guy at that point.
I don't want anything for him at this point. Like, to me, these shooting numbers, I don't know if they come up. They can't get worse. I don't know if they improve enough to really improve
He's
any
shooting
type
like
of
13% from three.
I don't know if there's any type of trade value improvements that are going to be made for him.
I feel like you have to buy him out, like come buyout time, February, March.
I mean,
I
he
just
needs
don't
to
see
go
you being
somewhere.
able to trade him.
Yeah, and if you do, you're trading him for nothing, right? But you got to fulfill the salary of $20 million. So it's a tough situation. But that being said, I have fully convinced myself MCW needs to come back and just take all his minutes. I think that's all that needs to happen.
I mean, in terms of asset management, I don't think that's the best way to handle things, but I do agree with you that it's probably the best thing for the team.
Yeah.
That's
what angle
do
I'm
think
coming
we would
from
be
it.
better
Yeah.
right now on the floor with Michael Carter Williams versus Gary Harris.
Right.
So
Agree.